Have you ever seen this map? Because if not, it's definitely time that you do. It's a map based off of the Monroe Doctrine that was introduced by President James Monroe in 1823. And basically, it says that the Western Hemisphere belongs to the Americas and that no foreign power should have any control over it. Back in the day, it was referring to Europe, but today it applies to China and Russia. That's why when Marco Rubio was being interviewed about why the United States captured Maduro and Venezuela, he said it had nothing to do with oil at all, but actually had to do with...
China need their oil. Why does Russia need their oil? Why does Iran need their oil? They're not even in this continent. This is the Western Hemisphere. This is where we live. And we're not going to allow the Western Hemisphere to be a base of operation for adversaries, competitors, and rivals of the United States.
The Monroe Doctrine that President Trump has been referencing refers to the United States controlling the Western Hemisphere, which includes Greenland, Cuba, Colombia, Venezuela, which is why you've heard about us getting involved in those countries lately. It's about energy dominance. Oil, gas, lithium, rare earths in the Americas must not fall under hostile control. Financial power, making sure that the dollar system remains dominant in this hemisphere. Military exclusion, you just heard Marco Rubio saying this, no rival power gets permanent bases near U.S. territory, and information and tech control, telecom, satellites, AI, and surveillance matter as much as tanks. If a new world order is happening right now, many people believe it'll end up looking something like this. After all, yesterday, President Trump did say,
peace on earth.
Peace on earth. We gotta have peace. It's our hemisphere. The Monroe Doctrine was very important when it was done, and other presidents, a lot of them, they lost sight of it. I didn't lose sight, but it really is, it's peace on earth.
I think it's safe to say that this is something we should all be paying attention to and not just some crazy conspiracy theory. But as always, I want to hear what you think.
I didn't lose sight, but it really is, it's peace on earth.
I think it's safe to say that this is something we should all be paying attention to and not just some crazy conspiracy theory. But as always, I want to hear what you think.
All right, Shalom. It's your brother Kushab. Coming at you with another lesson. Before I get started, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachak Kodash, and double honors once again to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who taught me this truth and rule well, and peace, blessings, salutations be to the hopefully elect, as well as those that believe in the gospel, and may you endure to the end, Lord willing. All right, and as you can see, right, with the lesson I had queued up and let play concerning this Monroe Doctrine. All right, something that Trump has recently mentioned. All right, as you saw in the video, you know, and with this whole thing with the whole capture and kidnapping, all right, of the Venezuelan president. All right, you know, all of these things, you know, that's why, you know, as I spoke with the brother Raya real briefly about that camp, you know, I just kind of wanted to see, you know, after a couple of days, you know, what was this thing really about, you know? And lo and behold, you know, that's what this is what it's coming to, right? And that's why you have, you know, Trump, now he's going back and forth, all right, with the president of Colombia, man, all right? And we're going to start off in the book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, all right? Because this is the innermost thoughts of this devil, all right? He thinks everything belongs to him, all right? The nations, the people, all right, these different lands, all right, and that's what I wanted to read a little bit in this Monroe Doctrine, all right, which was enacted in 1823, all right, and, you know, Trump has recently invoked this, okay, in which this was, I'll read it. It says, the Monroe Doctrine declared by President James Monroe in 1823 was a cornerstone U.S. foreign policy, warning European powers against further colonization or interference in the Americas, all right, which pertaining to North and South America, all right, which in 1823, you know, the U.S., it wasn't as strong as it is today, you know, meaning that it didn't have 50 states, all right. I think back then it might have been around maybe like 13 or something, which, you know, I'm not good on American history, you know, that they taught us in school, but, you know, I believe it was like the 13 colonies or something like that. But, you know, I'm not sure, don't quote me on it, but, you know, they weren't as strong, all right, as they are today, which is the main point. It says, asserting the Western Hemisphere as a U.S. sphere of influence in exchange for U.S. neutrality in European conflicts, profoundly shaping American grand strategy and its role as regional power. Its core principles establish separate spheres for Europe and the Americas, right? Which that was the last picture that the lady had showed or whatever, when she had wrote Putin name on one side and Trump name on another. All right. And that's what they, it could go like that, right? But we know according to prophecy, all right, that, that this devil, all right, he's not going to fulfill, all right, these plans of an NWO, and ultimately Russia is going to come against America. All right, so it ain't going to be no, oh, we all good on this side and Putin all good on that side. All right. It says its core principles establish separate spheres for Europe and the Americas, prohibited new European colonies, and viewed any foreign intervention as a hostile act. You see, and that's what they're doing today. All right. So, like I said, I believe that, China, all right, Russia, all right, these different countries that's not allies of the U.S., they were looped in on what's going on. All right. Even though they condemned what happened, it was no retaliation or anything, But it says impacting U.S. actions in Latin America for centuries, as recently invoked by DT in Venezuela. All right. Now, who's to say, this guy, and they talking big shit right now, between him and Colombia. All right. Because Trump, he mentioned a few times Colombia and I believe Mexico as well. Let's just search it up real quick. All right, if I get the scripture. See if anything comes up. All right. See what the, as you can see, he's starting in Cuba, right? Colombia and Mexico. All right, let's go with this one. All right. It says Latin America silent as Trump menaces Cuba and Colombia and Mexico. The silence marks a sharp departure from widespread passionate condemnation this weekend of the capture of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. Colombian President Petro has sought to rally his people in the faces of threats from Donald Trump that he too could be arrested. All right. Now it says the American president is lobbying increasingly direct threats at multiple countries in Latin America, you see, in which this all goes back to what? This right here, man, the Monroe Doctrine. All right. It says, when you go to the bottom part, all right here, where it says core principles, all right, it says its core principles establish separate spheres for Europe and Americas, prohibited new European colonies, and viewed any foreign intervention as a hostile act impacting U.S. actions in Latin America for centuries. All right. And so, this guy is basically coming into the point to where if you start intervening with the things that the U.S. are doing, all right, to the other Americas, all right, he's going to view it as a hostile act. All right. That's why he's saying, other presidents forgot about the Monroe Doctrine, right? But he's remembering it, you see? All right. It says the key principles, and I'm going to just read a little bit of that. The Americas and Europe have distinct political systems and interests, right? Which is why you have all of these disagreements between America and Europe now, all right? But that's cool, all right? I ain't going to read all that. Just get the point, all right? But this is Habakkuk chapter 2, all right? In verse 5, it says, yea, because he transgressed by wine, he is a proud man, all right? And transgression by that wine is these doctrines and philosophies that Esau Edom comes up with, all right, in order to, heap him to himself more and more, all right, as he's going to say. It says, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death and cannot be satisfied. All right. And that's what you're seeing now. All right. He's not satisfied with just having America. All right. He wants to, as the slogan goes, all right, make America great again. You see, which means a number of things, right? It says, who enlargeth his desire as hell, all right, and is as death and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations and heapeth unto him all people. You see? And that's what, you know, the bulk of these guys, all right, these puppets that run America have done. All right, and that's what the elites have done, truly. Okay. It says, verse 6, shall not all these take up a parable against him and a taunting proverb against him and say, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his. How long? And to himself that laden himself with thick clay. All right, which is these heavy debts, man. All right. But it says, woe unto them that increaseth that which is not his. And that's what this devil is doing, man. Increasing that which is not his. All right. These lands are not his. Fuck. America is not his. You see? But he's still what? Heaping unto himself all nations and all people. All right. As it says in Micah, the 2nd chapter. All right. They covered fields. Right. It's Micah chapter 2, verse 2. It says, I'll read verse 1. It says, woe unto them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it because it is in the power of their hand. You see, they doing it just because they know that they can do it. You see, it says, and they covet fields and they take them by violence and houses and take them away. So they oppress a man and his house, even a man and his heritage. You see, and that's what they've done. All right. When you look at the track record of the so-called white man, it's nothing but rape, rob, and murder, man. All right. You've oppressed men and their heritage. All right. From multiple nations, man. You see, you have been the hammer of the earth, as it tells you in Jeremiah. All right. This Jeremiah chapter 50, verse 23. It says, I'll start at verse 22. A sound of battle is in the land and of great destruction. How is the hammer of the whole earth cut asunder? All right. And that's exactly what you have been. A hammer in the earth. All right. It says in the NLT, Babylon, the mightiest hammer in all the earth. All right. You have the strongest, the most mightiest military. All right. The most mightiest weapons. All right. But it's going to come a point in time that you're going to be totally cut and broken asunder, man. You see, it says, how is Babylon? All right. Which this what Babylon is, you know, represents America. All right. How has Babylon become a desolation among the nations? You see. And this is why. Verse 24, you see, it says, I have laid a snare for thee, and thou art also taken. O Babylon, and thou was not aware. Thou art found and also caught, because thou hast striven against Yahweh. You see, and that's why. All right. The Lord has allowed you to rule for a short period of time. All right. But now he's getting ready to take your ass up out of the power, man. All right. And as it says in Revelation, the 12th chapter, you know, that he's going to come down with great wrath. Well, this is what we're seeing. He's going to come down on great wrath on you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. And he's going to come down in great wrath on these other nations as well. All right. And something else that I forgot to mention was him, you know, he's been mentioning Greenland too. All right. Well, you have Germany saying that, you know, that would be a violation, all right, of whatever agreement that they have with NATO. All right. So, you know, these nations are definitely going to hate the whore. All right, and make her desolate, and we're seeing the beginning stages of that, man. All right, but you know that's pretty much the point of the lesson. You know, I didn't want to be too long. Lord willing, is edifying and straight to the point. All right, so with that, I'm gonna give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, by Hashem.